right. All right. So we continue in our Bible translation series, and we just have a couple more weeks left in it. So we've got to discuss with the elders who's picking up next. I'm actually working ahead on what I'll do eventually. Eventually, I'll do primeval history, Genesis 1 through 11. But who remembers what we covered last week in Sunday school? Yes, you were.
Cults.
We covered cult Bibles, yeah. And Matt actually had a whole lot of wonderful things to say, really helpful stuff. So that was really great. So anybody also remember anything particularly about that?
Passion Bible.
Yes. And is that a good Bible to use?
No.
Very much not.
Although I love Bethel music, so
Okay.
I've been struggling.
Yeah.
The translations we talked about were like mostly, if not all, were like one person's interpretation.
Rather than actual committee. Yep. So all right. So let's go ahead. So I want to kind of, in a sense, take a step back on rather than looking at the actual material of a translation. To kind of start today, I'd like to talk about how we got our translations, like who's giving us our translations and why. And I think it's a worthy aspect of our conversation, but there's a reason why this is a matter that I pushed back towards the end. Because to be frank, I think this is the kind of thing where most Christians don't know about these things, and if they don't know about them, they're pretty much okay. Right? I think that they're not hindered in their walk with the Lord, fundamentally based upon these things, even as some people end up having very strong opinions. For example, we're going to learn today that there's actually two Bibles, translations of the Bible, that are actually sometimes printed in that same warehouses that the Satanist Bible is printed. That's not like an opinion, that's a fact. But I think people make and sometimes people, will make a very strong deal of it. But I don't think we need to. Right? I think we can understand some of why things come about. But that doesn't also mean it shouldn't weigh into our decisions of what Bible translation that we use. I think it's helpful to kind of understand this basis. So before we dive into this, I'd like it if we could read from Philippians chapter 1, verses 3 through 5, as we talk about why the Word of God goes forward. Philippians chapter 1, verses 3 through 5.
What was that again?
Philippians 1, 3 through 5. Mark, you got it?
1, yes.
Yeah, go for it.
I thank my God every time I remember you. In all my prayers for all of you, I always pray with joy because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now.
Thank you. So I asked that to be read because in a whole lot of ways, a lot of Bible translators really serve as our partners in the gospel. And that's kind of the purpose of them being around. It's to be an aid, to be a service to us in the spreading of the gospel. Some less so than others. So let's talk about, kind of ask a big question. Why do people publish Bibles? What would drive someone to publish a Bible?
Monetary gain.
Monetary gain? Absolutely. Any other reasons why somebody would publish a Bible?
Distribute the word throughout the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Sarah, were you going to say something
to
else?
spread the gospel.
Yeah. I think in a lot of ways, all three of those are really core. So again, the main thing, hopefully, the main reason why the Bible is published by any publisher is going to be that it passes on God's word and therefore it gets the gospel out. So both of those things together, really, what Zach and Sarah said. But also, to be frank, it does make money. The Bible is the best-selling book, period, especially in print book. And so, if you're a publisher of books and you want to sell the best-selling book, you have to make a Bible. But also, another reason why publishers publish Bibles, which is an interesting aspect that I think is worth considering, is that publishing a Bible enables them to publish other things. So, for example, if you are publishing other Christian books and that you want to not have to pay a ton of money to be able to quote from the Bible, to be able to have a quote from the Bible, then a lot of times what you want to do is you want to publish your own Bible, create your own Bible. Because every time when you read a Christian book, or even a secular book, and they cite, the Bible says this, unless they're quoting the King James Version, they're paying somebody for for that. They're paying somebody for the right to use it. And so there are some groups, and we'll talk about some of those, that publish the Bible and publish a Bible in part to be able to make it so that they don't have to give that much resources towards somebody else. So they have their own Bible and they can kind of do it for free. Again, I don't think this is nefarious. I think sometimes this is just literally saving money so you can give money to missions rather than giving money to a different publisher. Does that make any sense? So what happens then with money that you use to buy a Bible, or even like if you use a Bible app, there's often advertisements on there, right? Which that they get money. The Bible translators get money because there's advertisement on BibleGateway.com. What happens with all that money, both from you buying a Bible and from advertisements?
I assume it goes into their general fund or whatever they call it,
Yeah.
and they can use it any way they like.
Yeah, so it's case by case, right? It really depends upon the Bible translation, and sometimes it depends on the printer or publisher, because those are not always the same thing, which we'll get into in a bit. So sometimes it just covers the material cost or the Amazon fee, right? So that because they have to pay an amount of money to Amazon to have the Bible, say, put on Amazon or whatever distributor, right? Even on Kindle, they have to pay a small amount of money, the publisher does. So ESV oftentimes, a lot of ESVs will go for next to nothing in terms of profit. It's just covering their costs often. But sometimes it funds other ministry. So again, Christian Standard Bible is a great example of this, which we'll get into, where a lot of the cost when you're paying for a Bible is not just going to the Bible, that they're taking that money to run other good ministries. But other times, a very small amount goes into for-profit companies. Or even particularly, and actually two well-known Bible translations case, a very small amount of each Bible sold goes into the pockets of secular billionaires, particularly. So, and I'm going to define who that is and how we think about that. But again, I want you to rest assured, we don't need to say somebody's compromised because they use a Bible that's made by a secular billionaire. So, but now, as we navigate understanding these things, are Bible translators, publishers, and printers the same? Is it that are printers, publishers, and translators always the same people?
No.
Bibles? No. Can anybody think of examples where that's not the case?
Well, a printing can just be a place where you go to put something on a press. So
Yes.
Mechanical
Yeah.
job.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, publisher can mean almost like a producer of a film, right? Which is different from a distributor of a film. It's just kind of making sure it gets made, and then sometimes producers have nothing to do with making sure it gets to a movie theater. And in the same way, there can be, though not always, typically not, there can be sometimes a difference between publishers and printers, and there's almost always a difference between translators. But publishers own the translation. Because publishers own the translation, publishers have authority over the process of translation. So, but usually what happens is translators are committees that are chosen by publishers. So a publisher says, we want to make a Bible. We want to make a Bible, particularly this kind of Bible, a very literal Bible maybe. And so what they do is they kind of hire out people, and they hire out a committee, usually headed by one kind of general editor, and that group makes the Bible. The publisher usually, that other than kind of giving that kind of focus of what they want the translation to be, usually the publisher has very little direct role in the process unless there's a controversial issue along the way. There are Bibles that are directly printed by publishers. This tends, honestly, most publishers print their own stuff in the secular world. And so an example, though, of cases where this happens with Bibles are the English Standard Version and the Christian Standard Bible. These are both printed by their publishers. Who knows what their publishers and printers are? Crossway for ESV and Lifeway for CSB. So confusing,
All
right?
the ways.
What'd you say?
All the ways.
Yeah. So ESV, again, this is that translation is owned by a company called Crossway. It was originally called Good News. I'm blanking on it had a different name and then changed to Crossway in the 90s. And then they make the Bible and they generally print the Bible in the United States. Sometimes they license it out in other countries. And the Christian Standard Bible is essentially the exact same thing. Christian Standard Bible is owned by Lifeway, which is part of what? Who knows what Lifeway is? Southern Baptist Convention. It is funded directly by, like, the little bit of money that we send to the Southern Baptist Convention, that funds things like making the Christian Standard Bible. And then they print their own Bibles and their own warehouses that they own, that's how we get the Bibles. It's a pretty simple process. But the NIV is a little more complicated. Who knows who's behind the NIV? And there's more than one answer here. Zondervan, yes. That's one of the answers. So it's two because it's a different printer than a publisher. So the NIV is published by the International Bible Society, the IBS, which is a group that's really committed to kind of seeing easy to read modern Bibles that are faithful. The IBS is a good group. The IBS has always been faithful and seeking out really helpful translations. But the IBS does not have the ability to print Bibles. You know, this is a relatively, even though NIV is huge, the IBS is a relatively small ministry, and therefore they have in the United States they've given exclusive printing rights to Zondervan. So when you see an NIV Bible, you will see the International Bible Society somewhere on it, but generally in bigger font you're going to see the Zondervan. So Zondervan is going to be the exclusive publishers in the U.S. I'm sure in other countries, you go to maybe Bangladesh and get an NIV somewhere there by some small company that's printing. But they don't have rights in other countries, but just exclusive rights in the United States. And it's a long-term deal. So Zondervan will be making the NIV for a very, very long time. But then another one to look at as an interesting example is the New American Standard Bible. Who knows who's behind the New American Standard Bible? This is a tricky answer, by the way. Any guesses? The New American Standard Bible is published by the Lockman Foundation. Lockman Foundation is behind multiple translations. It is behind Amplified Bible, which is not really a translation, but is a helpful resource. It's kind of translation slash commentary together. So it's an interesting thing, but they make the NASB and Amplified and a couple other Bibles, and they are similar to the International Bible Society. So it's a nonprofit foundation dedicated to bringing about useful Bibles in the modern world. But then the Lockman Foundation also does not print their own Bibles. And so they print, the NASB is actually printed by a variety of publishers, including Zondervan. So you will see Zondervan, when they release, like, say, a woman's devotional Bible, sometimes it will be in the NIV, King James, and the NASB. And the reason why they can do this is because they've gotten contractual right to be able to do that. By the way, one of the differences this makes when you have one publisher and one printer is that the words of the Bible cannot be modified by the printer. The publisher has the right to that. They could sue. So Zondervan cannot mess with it. However, what they could do is they could use that translation and then put whatever study notes in there. So theoretically, there could be a world where Zondervan decides that, I don't know, let's think of a view that nobody really has. Like, let's say they made the old political party Whigs, they make a Whig commentary on the Bible, advocating Whig ideals in politics, right? They could do that, and they could have the NIV as the main text, or they could have the NASB as the main text, and just say whatever else they want as kind of in the footnotes or as the commentary around that. So, which has its disadvantages and advantages. But then let's look at then, particularly though, who is behind the NIV, New King James, and the King James Bible, because there's a lot of overlap, particularly with the groups behind this, because we've mentioned Zondervan before. Does anyone know almost anything about Zondervan?
Owned by HarperCollins?
It is owned by HarperCollins, yes. So, does anybody know anything about Thomas Nelson?
I think they're also owned by HarperCollins.
Owned by HarperCollins. Yeah. So, who knows what HarperCollins is? Big. Yeah, second are biggest. Yeah, it's Random Penguin House and HarperCollins are kind of the two big publishers in the English-speaking world.
And
So,
News Corp owns HarperCollins.
bingo. Yep.
It
Yep,
looks
you're
like
right.
Zondervan started in 1931.
Yep.
And then it was bought in the late 80s.
I think it was bought by somebody else before it was bought by HarperCollins, if I remember correctly. It could be wrong in that, but yeah. So both Thomas Nelson and Zondervan were started as basically ministries that print Christian books, and they were not originally those that created Bibles, but just Christian books. And then they were making a lot of popular Christian books, and as a result of this, they were both bought by HarperCollins, which HarperCollins is a unique company because it's not really publicly traded in the way that a lot of big companies. I think Penguin Random House is publicly traded, but it's a direct subsidy of News Corp, which News Corp is heavily handedly run by one particular man. Who knows who runs News Corp, and therefore runs everything under News Corp. Rupert Murdoch. Does anybody know anything about Rupert Murdoch?
He's an Australian billionaire.
Yeah. So obviously he can't control everything that he owns makes, right? Yeah. So yeah, he's very conservative in a lot of ways. He's not a Christian either. He does not go to church. He's not a religious person, and in times he's been oppositional to the Christian faith. And he's also, with a lot of his companies, particularly with HarperCollins, he tends to be a pretty heavy-handed CEO. He's passing down his company to one of his daughters, I think, soon. One of his kids, either way. So, and yeah, so he's very involved. So literally, he has direct oversight over translations that are made under HarperCollins. Again, we need to recognize that just because he has this power doesn't mean that he's going to use this nefarious means. He wants to make money, and if you stop buying a Bible because he messes with it, does he make money? No, he does not make money. So Zondervan and Thomas Nelson, since being acquired by HarperCollins, have been over time progressively less committed to certain historical Christian doctrines since being acquired. One example that is often cited is that Zondervan and Thomas Nelson are kind of progressively moving towards that they don't publish books really related to teaching against homosexuality or transgenderism. That's kind of a progressive move that you're seeing. That I've even known people who've written books that have tried to get things published through Zondervan and Thomas Nelson, and increasingly it's not that they're publishing books that are homosexuality is wonderful. It's just that I don't want to touch that. And as well as there's multiple other issues where kind of historic Christian views kind of go at odds with values of Rupert Murdoch or values that the culture would embrace. And so Zondervan and Thomas Nelson have kind of increasingly had a don't touch this thing. Now I'm going to note there are good people in both companies. Actually, that I have a personal friend that works for Thomas Nelson and has significant oversight over the children's ministry books that they publish. So this is not one of the ways that we could go wrong in this is pretending, that these are corrupt companies that are just trying to distort Christians. That's really not how it works. I mean, they're being pulled towards profit margin, but it's generally those that are within the actual sub companies of Thomas Nelson and Zondervan. These would be actual Christian people by and large, but there would be some pulls away in different areas. And their vested interest is in avoiding extreme compromise. But again, News Corp, why do you think News Corp bought Thomas Nelson and Zondervan?
To make money.
Yes. So was it to bring the Bible to the masses?
No. It's an investment.
It's an investment. It was Zondervan and Thomas Nelson makes us money, and they have interest in owning them as long as that continues to make us money. And by the way, with that, some of the reason why there's been a lot of criticisms over the ads that run on Bible Gateway or Bible Gateway's app, particularly, has been because Zondervan owns Bible Gateway. And Zondervan, and the advertisement, it tends to be run by the HarperCollins end. And so sometimes you get some not very Christian-friendly ads on BibleGateway.com. And it's because, again, it's driven towards that kind of profit margin. So, but also because this is all under HarperCollins, would you guess that HarperCollins has one printing warehouse for one division and a different printing warehouse for a different division?
Yes.
Largely, no.
Oh,
So,
okay.
they're
So
limited,
Zondervan's becomes part of the newly formed HarperCollins Christian Publishing Division in 2012.
Yes, so
Okay.
so they are, they have their own, so what happens when a bigger company owns a smaller publisher is that it's kind of its own like offices, that this own like board or whatever. So Thomas Nelson and Zondervan, they would have like little offices for people that approve books, right? But in terms of actually printing the Bible, what they're going to do for efficiency's sake is anything owned by any subsidiary, any printed subsidiary of News Corp is going to be printed in the same regional warehouses, right? And
It's like if you buy a TV, whether it's Samsung, Sony, or LG, it's all made by the same.
often, yeah. And
Factory
so the
in
result
Korea.
of this is like there's actually been even people that have made these controversial pictures that nobody's really hiding. That I mean, that HarperCollins owns the Satanist Bible, and they sometimes have printed the Satanist Bible in the same warehouses that they've printed the NIV, particularly. Again, it's an interesting tidbit. Some people have made a bigger deal out of it than I think that we should. But that would never, ever, ever happen with the ESV unless the ESV were to be bought, which I don't think they would allow themselves to do that because they would believe that this is a passion project, this isn't a profit project. So, and NIV has significant but not perfect publisher protections, and I think that is a really interesting thing to note, though. Because again, as NIV is not being published by Zondervan, they're just being printed by Zondervan. And as a result of that, that International Bible Society, they make sure that nobody who prints the NIV can mess with this. That they can add their own commentary, but they cannot mess with the text, or else you lose your right to print. So, and so this kind of protects this. But the New King James Version is also owned by HarperCollins through Thomas Nelson. And the New King James Version really is only that it is directly owned and directly published by Thomas Nelson, and who has oversight over it, which means HarperCollins has oversight of the New King James. And so New King James is a very good translation in a lot of ways, but there's a lot of ways in which the New King James, the only thing that keeps it from being changed to whatever ideal that is held by the world tomorrow, is the thing that keeps it from that is that would lose money for HarperCollins. And HarperCollins doesn't want to lose money. But at the moment where it starts losing money the other way, there should be an open question what's going to happen. But then King James Version, who knows the printing and publishing status of the King James Version?
It's I don't know what the term
Open
is,
source?
but
Public
anybody
domain.
can publish it
Public
free.
domain.
Except in UK.
Really? I didn't know
UK
that.
is still owned by the Crown, as far as I know.
Okay, interesting.
Is that
But
right?
in the U.S., that King James Version is public domain, which means anybody can do anything they want with it. It's for everybody to own. And the result of this, it's just, I mean, because it's really expensive to print your own Bibles, that it tends to be printed by other major printers and publishers, typically other Christian ones. Most that you'll find in bookstores are going to be often printed by Thomas Nelson. Thomas Nelson is going to be probably the most common source of having a King James Version, which also means, again, all of the problems of HarperCollins on the New King James, on the NIV particularly, are relevant to the King James. But they could also make their own HarperCollins King James too. There are actually a lot of kind of cult or extreme translations that use the King James because you can modify it if you want to. Because again, it's everybody owns it. That's what public domain means. So, but then finally, let's see who's involved in the NLT, the New Living Translation. Anybody guess? Who remembers how we got the New Living Translation? We covered this like 3 months ago. That's okay.
Same people who made
The Living Book.
the Living Book.
Yeah. So the NLT is published by a company named Tyndale and printed by Tyndale. And it's this is a little bit of an interesting story because this is kind of backwards to how most publishers of Bibles work. Most publishers exist and then they decide to order a Bible to be translated, right? For the New Living Translation, the exact opposite is true. The New Living Translation existed before its publisher existed. And the Tyndale publishing house was created specifically to be the New Living Translation and the Living Bible publisher. So that they could kind of have control and they could have it in-house. That was originally the Tyndale, that's all they did at first. And they've expanded since then. Tyndale is a small company. It's probably the smallest company that makes a reputable Bible. And it makes really good stuff by and large. A lot of good academic stuff and understanding the Bible. But it is fairly egalitarian, which means that it often compromises on areas of biblical teaching on gender roles. But again, by and large, Tyndale, I mean, they're going to do what they can to make sure NLT and things around the NLT are basically solid. But the NLT is the great focus of Tyndale. Essentially, to Tyndale, everyone who works at Tyndale, the NLT is their bread and butter. If they drop everything else, they will still be the creators of the NLT. That is their passion project, which is, again, creates a different relationship to translation than other groups. So, and then I want to ask them that. I've got a couple. We'll move the rest of the stuff to next week, I guess. So, but any kind of closed questions or thoughts on this, as we've talked about these kind of Bible translations and where they're coming from? I hope this isn't just trivia to you guys, and I think part of the reason why I wanted to cover it is because there are people that, again, make a really big deal out of these kind of things, and sometimes the big deal people make out of them is really uninformed. And I have heard, and I probably even repeated in the past, the idea that the NIV is basically, the NIV is like a secular Bible. And is that true? No. And why might somebody say that? And why do you know it's not true?
As often as printed by HarperCollins.
Mm-hmm.
It's printed by a secular company, published by a
Yes.
secular company.
But it's not published by a secular company. It's printed by a secular company, right?
Okay.
It's just, they just have a license to print it, right? New King James Version is a little harder to argue in that area. But again, for profit reasons, they're going to protect it. But I mean, the truth is, in a lot of ways, we want affordable Bibles. We have to live in a world of for-profit businesses. And so it's kind of a mess that we have to navigate. But I also think I think it's a worthwhile thing to factor in, because I honestly think, to me, if there's two Bibles that are just about as good as one another, and one of them is printed and published by a company I really love, I'm going to be more likely to get the one from the company I really love. Because what I'm going to see it as is, when I pay the $10 for an NIV, right, I'm getting a good Bible. But a part of that is going towards less good things. A part of my $10, that doesn't mean I'm responsible. But if I give it $10 for buying the ESV or a CSB, all of that money is going to be used for either covering costs or for gospel purposes. So in a way, it's almost like a little bit of a donation. And that's just less so with other translations. That doesn't mean that one trend that makes a final decision. But do you think it's okay to allow these things to factor into our decisions?
It's on your conscience, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So, why don't we go ahead and close in prayer? Father God, I come before you and give you thanks for your word. I thank you for this opportunity to understand more about how your word is given to us. I pray, Father, that you would be with us today. I pray that you be with Pastor Michael as he brings the word today. I ask, Lord, that you would use that to transform our lives, and that you bless us this word. We ask this all in Jesus' name. Amen.